Okay, hi. So yes, welcome. Yes, Ken asked me a little while ago if I'd like to have a show here. I was in a show that Kate Love curated, the late great Kate curated. Was it 2019?
2019, yeah.
And I've had a couple of works in a couple of other group shows here, so I was very happy to take up the opportunity, and it's allowed me to show. This is all brand new work. Or the first time I've shown all this work, apart from this video work here, which I showed in a group show at Victoria Miro, themed around the story of Leader and the Swan. It's sort of a little bit of a continuation of some of the preoccupations I've had since, over the last couple of years. I was introduced to the vicar of St James's Church 2 or 3 years ago with perhaps the notion of trying to make something for that space. That's the one that's opposite the Royal Academy. It's Christopher Wren Church, and I became quite fascinated with the history and the people that had worshipped there. So this was the church where Blake was baptised. Handel played the organ there. William Hunter tomb is there, and Isaac Newton worshipped there every Sunday and lived a stone's throw along Jermyn Street behind, and I was kind of interested in particular, Blake's enmity towards Newton and what he found to be a very cold and rather bleak pursuit, and that there was no art or poetry or within his soul, and in a sense that's a sort of classic opposition between the sciences and the arts that kind of plays out in various forms since. But I found lots of Newton's writing incredibly beautiful, and his equations and his discoveries are quite gobsmacking, and particularly as most of them were made before he was the age of 26. So the idea that gravity is the reverse square of the distance between objects is the shortest, the most beautiful little equation in science, perhaps. And so with that in mind, I made 2 or 3 video works to do with that church, and one that included his blue plaque on Jermyn Street. When I was asked to take part in the Leader and Swan show, I don't know if everyone is familiar with the story, but Zeus assumes the form of a swan and seduces, basically rapes Leda, and as a result of that, and because she'd already been impregnated by her mortal husband, she produces 2 eggs, and in one egg are the twins Castor and Pollux. And Castor was mortal, and his brother Pollux was immortal, and they both fell in love with the same woman. Anyway, so I was working with this story or thinking about this story and how I might produce something, and then at the back of my mind for a long time, I've thought that astronauts, because of all the kind of padding and the big kind of helmet, and it reduces an adult male to the proportions of a baby and a toddler, and I suddenly thought of spacewalks and this kind of umbilical cord, in a sense, that carries the oxygen to to the spacewalker. And then by that point I'd come across this incredible piece of music, Jean-Philippe Rameau was a French composer who was, well, for many years more known as a theoretician and teacher, and then he started writing operas later on in his life, and this one's from the middle of the 18th century, I think 1737 or 1747. And this aria opens the opera, and it's cast as beloved who's mourning his loss in battle, and how she never wants to see another sunrise. And then it's one of those sort of works that kind of came together to quite a large extent serendipitously. The Russian craft. So basically, what we're seeing in this video on the left is Sergei Leonov, who was the first man to walk in space. This was in April 1965, and then, this being at the height of the Cold War, 77 days later, the Americans and NASA, and this is Ed White, making a similar walk. So, you know, in a sense, this is about as epic or mythical as man can get, really, kind of floating free on the edge of space, I thought. And so once Castro died, the Princess Hilaire and his brother and whatever kind of come to a deal with the gods in that the twins would spend half their time in the underworld and the other half as the two brightest stars in the constellation Gemini, the craft that Ed White was in was called Gemini, and the Russian craft was called Sunrise. Yeah, and it's strange to think how old and how historical all this stuff is. So and the kind of quality of the material and all the rest of it. So it does an odd thing, I think, just thinking about science and progress and its appropriation by the two superpowers at the time. Because I don't know if you know the story, but I mean, prior to JFK declaring that they were going to be on a mission to put a man on the moon, their initial idea was to explode a nuclear device on the moon that would be visible from Earth. This was as a proxy kind of beware to the Soviets back then. So a lot of the story could have been very different. And there's a poignant sort of story after this. So Ed White, about a year or so later, was on the launch pad in the first Apollo mission, and it burnt up on the launch pad, and all the astronauts died. Leonov here, once he'd exited the craft, realised he was in trouble because the pressure started building inside his suit, and if he didn't find a way of releasing the pressure, he wouldn't actually have been able to get back into the craft, and so actually you're seeing someone who's kind of fighting for his life as much as anything. But I suppose I've had this notion of the art and science thing, and that particular history of St James's Church. Also, I mean, in reference to Christopher Wren, who was a great scientist and astronomer in himself, you know, and so thematically that kind of gets linked up here. The object here on the plinth is called Margate Sands, and which was made in answer to a request from Clary here, because we were celebrating the centenary of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland in 2022. Eliot was at the time, well, he had pretty much a nervous breakdown, and his doctors advised him to rest and convalesce, so he went to Margate, and it was there that he'd already embarked on the poem that we now know as The Wasteland, and in Margate he began spending his days sitting in this old Edwardian shelter on the front, which is one of the first things you see coming out of the station there, recently restored, I'm happy to hear. And he started writing what became the fire sermon section of the poem, in which he writes, on Margate sands I can connect nothing with nothing, and I suppose I've had my own history of kind of mental health and depression and panic attacks, and sort of drawing on that, and then I suddenly, I suppose I was thinking of something that would summon up the seaside, but have some kind of, in a panic attack, you kind of, you're in the absolute continuous present tense, and it becomes quite terrifying and suffocating, and I suddenly had the thought of, if I took an hourglass and put it on its side, and then the thing was about a rather completely suffocating space, and there is some kind of linkage between the one kind of bubble shape and the other, but it's completely a mirror in a sense, and so it's this very trapped kind of relationship that's expressed, I thought, or I hope, but at the same time it carries some of the language of the souvenir or something slightly more elaborate to do with a particular place and locale. And I've added a little tag saying Margate Sands, which quite like, which kind of suggests a kind of a gift shop or the sort of place where you might find something like this, but also slyly a quote from the poem as well. And I mean, the other thing to remember is that, and I never asked you, Clary, how that work ended up only in the gents' toilet on the station about the word toilets.
Oh, I don't know, because it was before my time.
Oh right, yeah. So when I'd actually shown a work at Margate about 12, 13 years ago. It was a work called Cinema Amnesia, and it was like a shipping container on the front, and which you entered, and it was a bit like entering a camera obscura, because at the end you're looking at this screen and it appears to be the view you would see if that was a window, but it was exactly 24 hours before, so it was running yesterday constantly. So I had that kind of Eliot and Margate connection as well, but it took a while to get the emphases and how to finish this in the end. And then as you came in the door, there's work I call alter ego. During the pandemic, I lived in Soho, and so that first lockdown particularly, the contrast between before and after could hardly be starker. You know, there was no one on the streets. There were no cars. You know, foxes and ducks. There was quite a lot of porous action around St James's Park. There were a pair of mallards that took up residence outside Pizza Hut on Leicester Square, you know, and so and I remember going with my partner to Trafalgar Square on Easter Sunday, and there wasn't another human visible, or a vehicle or anything for a little while, and I remember taking the front of the National Gallery looked like one of those Renaissance ideal city paintings. You know, if you remove all those kind of clues to modernity and activity, and I was taking a panoramic shot when this cyclist must have whizzed by, and the camera caught him, and he looked like an early futurist work. I mean, the way that the camera tried to kind of make sense of this sudden explosion of speed, and so I sort of ran with that, and I started taking photographs around central London, and particularly around Oxford Street, which, so, you know, all the shops on that mile or so of retail outlets all became kind of vitrines to the world as it was up until, you know, March 2020, and but then after a while, once people kind of got the hang of lockdowns and the pandemic, it started becoming a kind of recreation ground or parade, and it seemed to attract the younger, more attractive people who could deal with checking themselves out in the reflections of all the shops. And it's a very long way around describing this video, but anyway, this is got to come from somewhere. And so I made these photographs, and then I kind of there was a sort of that strange quality of solidarity but distance that was, you know, that experience of lockdown, and when you add to that the sort of, you know, very fit young people who seem to be, you know, impregnable and kind of like, I don't know, but I was trying to find a way of expressing that, and I tried to use some of the photographs I'd taken, and in the end I made these figures that revolved that were taken from stock photograph agencies of people who were slightly posed but kind of, you know, looking super clean and smartly dressed, and I printed them out, and then I printed their mirror image and then stuck them both together, and then followed the process, and then I fed one into the other, and then they kind of revolved on these mirrorball motors. So that they had this kind of this weird presence. They were kind of, in a sense, they were even less than two dimensions because of the mirror image. You didn't know which side was the genuine likeness of the person, and then the thing pretended to have some kind of solidity or depth or presence, but anyway, it was at the end of the process of that I thought I should do something similar to my face. I mean, it's everyone's experience that we don't see ourselves as others do. We live with our mirror image our entire life, and photographs that people send of ourselves, we always look, well, askew, unless we're incredibly symmetrical, and so this again was kind of uniting two different mirror images of my face together, so that actually there's never a proper description of how I look, and I quite like returning it from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions. So even though you kind of know the process, it's still an unnerving gaze. I sort of hope. But I think with all these things that I've been describing, they always have to have a visual hook, or I try and retain as clearly as possible what it was about a certain moment that made me realise something about something I'd witnessed, seen, suddenly remembered, or that led me to have, in some ways, some small kind of revelation or epiphany or something like that. So that I hope that the work results has some of that immediacy, or that reference. And yeah, I think we could. Maybe I'll talk about the field paintings for the other video first. But so when I originally went to our school, Chelsea School of Art, it was very much along the lines of painting or sculpture. There was a life room. There was a little bit of photography, but it was still that kind of old school delineation. And I was a bit lost there for the 3 years I was there, but then, over the following years, although I kind of gone there thinking I wanted to be a painter, or perhaps I even still thought of painting as being utterly synonymous with being an artist. I started to become a different kind of artist, and started to allow myself to. I remember the first kind of object I made in the studio, and it was a bit like I was looking around to see who I could ask permission to make a sculpture, because I was so still rather subconsciously stuck with these older notions. But I mean, then I went to Goldsmiths MA, and then not long after that I started teaching on the Goldsmiths course. And I began kind of opening up my practice to other possibilities. Other things kind of came along. Camcorders became affordable for students and younger artists, so suddenly you're dealing with some kind of indexical relationship to the real world. You're playing with time in the edit suite. So all these different media suggest within themselves their own ways forward. But painting, I've always sort of returned to as almost like a kind of an eternal sort of conundrum, really, or a problem, or however you look upon it. I mean, I guess for art historically, once photography usurped its role in a kind of reliable record of the world, as seen through a lens, or through our lenses or camera lenses, and then how painting kind of developed in reaction to that. All that I've found fascinating down the years, and things you can't quite avoid. You can't make paintings in a naive fashion, or maybe I'm saying you shouldn't do. And so for all the kind of projects that I've made, sometimes in a sort of public realm, and in my studio practice every so often I do come back and try and think about this nice problem of a constant of something that's kind of essentially flat on the wall, and so I went from, so around about 2007 I started doing these paintings that I called self-portraits, which were just the capitalised letter I's, black on white, and I started with sort of known fonts. So by this point, you know, we were all a fair few years into home computers, laptops and all that, and we'd all got more and more adept and knew what different fonts seemed to signify or how they operated and what kind of authority or nuance they added to any text, and then I pushed this eye motif further. I mean, I like the fact that in English we've just got this eye, which is a bit like a column or a standing figure, and it's the word we have for ourselves that paradoxically we share with everyone else. And then I started pushing that further and did a whole series of what I call freehand ones, but it's still sort of clung onto this motif. And then I moved into a studio in an old bomb factory in Archway, which is very, very tall, and I thought I'd finished a series of self-portraits by this point, and then I thought, well, maybe not. What if I take them up to a monumental sort of scale? So I ordered some stretchers that were like my span, which is the same as one's height, and then double height, and made 10 of these paintings, black on white, that kind of wrote a bit of a gamut of painterly language. And towards the end of them, though, I started using my hands, and then the final one in this sequence I made as a series of handprints, and like halfway through trying to summon up this kind of serif shape, I flipped this very tall canvas over and then completed the other end, and then I suddenly thought, well, you know, this started becoming like a small performance, and I suddenly thought, well, I've reached a point where I've managed to throw out a lot of things that are distracting, unimportant. I found some parameters here that it's going to be black on white. It's this size and shape because of my physical dimensions. What if I dispense with brushes altogether? And that might sound crude, but you can actually move a handful of paint a lot further and with more fluidity than you can imagine. And our hands are the most dexterous things we have, rather than a hairy stick, you know. So I started making these paintings that were a bit more well, they were both kind of a performance and the record of that performance, and not least because and then the other thing I discovered was that I did have a bit of a facility for symmetry, and throughout my practice I've been a little bit obsessed with symmetries and mirrors and so I would go into this kind of drawing movement kind of performative thing, try and stop myself before I'd even thought too much about what I was doing with that, and then stand back and then go back, then flip the painting, which is like 12 foot high really, and then I had something to react against. So it was trying to tap into something as free and as unconscious as possible. And I call them id paintings, so I was on a roll with those for quite a while, and then they mutated into a series called action paintings and another series that were I called mirror paintings, and I was still using my hands at this point. And then at the beginning of for that first summer of the pandemic, I've been taking these photographs, as I was saying. After the first initial 3 months, I felt I qualified as one of those people who had to go to my place of work really to carry on my profession. So I started going back to the studio, and we live in a 2-bedroom flat without a garden, and I kind of got involved in making these paintings using plasticine, these tabletop paintings. So again, you know, it was another way of making kind of paintings in inverted commas, but kind of finding an approach in which I couldn't slide into kind of any. I mean, all artists start off as pastiches, really, and you kind of, and part of the falling in love with art and wanting to be an artist is being acutely aware of how someone's done this, or why has he done that, how could I do that, and you know, it's and so yeah, and making paintings, because it's been happening for so many centuries. You know you can't get away with certain things because you've fallen into a cliche, or you know how this usually works for people. Well, and that's not a genuine reason enough, you know. And so the paintings in particular felt very liberating and not with any precedents in mind that I had. And then last summer, I suppose, I like to work with perspective, with illusion, just with the notion of perception itself, because it's, in a sense, it's the one thing we know we can reliably expect that we have similar experiences to everyone else. But at the same time, you know, when you're in the opticians and he's going, this way or this one, this one or this one, it's like, oh God, I can't phone a friend, you know. So you really are like thrown back on the actuality of this is how you in particular see this. You know, I want to know what the truth is there, and I was talking to Clary earlier. There was an exhibition at the Hayward from about 15 years or more ago called Eyes, Lies and Illusions, which was about all those things, and quite a lot of the time it's to surprise us about our own consciousness or the way our consciousness has processed visual stimuli and how we can be so often fooled, and I suppose I began thinking of the Moiré pattern effect, which I don't know if you know, but if you have, I mean, you can experience it from neck curtains to, I mean, I've always noticed if you're driving on a motorway and just that distance between the two slatted bridges go together, you get that kind of that weird wave-like movement that starts happening, and I started playing around with this very fine mesh, and what I like about these is that they are entirely indexical, descriptive, representative, however you want to put it, of the process of their making. So it is simply, with this one, there was a black sheet ground, if you like, and then the two layers of the similar denier mesh, one over the other, and just by dint of stretching them over the frame. They describe at every point the tensions that are working on them, and I call them field paintings. The whole idea of the kind of physical field comes down to us from Faraday, and I guess it's that paradoxical thing that things are both particle and wave, and in a sense that this is this just does its business, and as you move across it, things shift and change. And I quite like the fact that actually the actual surface is very hard to kind of feel or define or feel you've got something on, but there's a certain kind of beauty that's a little bit reminiscent of what it is when you see the natural world, of bark, of water, of those kind of patternings, because that's just physics. That's kind of what's going to happen. If you do this and this, then this will follow. So I'm excited about these. I've worked with some black ones and some different shades of some of the duller, earthier colours, but I'm excited to start working with some primary colours next to see what happens. But I quite like their autonomy. Yes, and this work here, which the name of which is the title of the exhibition. This is called "Gravity is the Weakest Force in the Universe," which it is. It sounds a bizarre thing to say, because it's what keeps us revolving around the sun and everything else. And yet, I just by doing that, you're defying the entire gravity of the Earth. And I mean, this is a bit self-referential here, but so to give a bit of the backstory. I was approached by the London School of Economics. Well, I actually was part of a competition to win a commission for this space in the campus of the LSE, which is Kingsway down the end here, and the Peacock Theatre, and it was to sit outside. They commissioned and built a new student union building, and so this was to kind of be, they wanted something sculptural outside, and I came up with this, which I called "The World Turned Upside Down." So anyway, it was a lengthy business. It took 5 years from the proposal being accepted to finally getting it cited. So I'm interested in making a particular globe of the world. "The World Turned Upside Down" is a ballad from the English Revolution, and the title of Christopher Hill's definitive history of the revolution, and that's what it is. And I suppose people have seen that sort of thing before, but on maps, and that still retain that Mercator projection, which bizarrely takes 1 point at each pole and then stretches it across the entire width of the image. And so, just from a physical point of view, I felt it was still worth doing something like that. We have a standard way of seeing the world that still has quite a lot in this country to do with our history and colonialism and having 0 degrees meridian here and the rest of the world. Following on, and there is no up or down in space. So let's turn this upside down, so just physically that makes apparent just quite how crowded the northern hemisphere is in land masses, and as much as the Mercosur projection expands things enormously, so Canada and Russia are just almost infinitely large going up to the poles. It also diminished Africa in particular, which was in the centre of the whole image, if you like. And so this kind of brings back the true size of Africa. I obviously chose to make a political map of the world, and I tried as far as possible to follow all the approved, latest approved UN maps around the world, but on certain matters they do fudge the issue, and I don't know if that's to do with members of the permanent members of the Security Council or all the rest of it, but anyway, the whole time we were sending the LSE the latest versions that we're going to use until going into the unveiling, and then things kind of took a turn for the well, quite stressful actually. The director of the LSE got my name wrong at the unveiling, so I was Mark Wallinger, and I could tell who my family and friends were in the audience because they were creasing up, you know. And then within 48 hours, I was getting a lot of Chinese Google alerts, and there are. There were at that point 1,600 Chinese students at the LSE, and I'd made the decision to show Taiwan as a sovereign state because the UN had it as part of China, which I couldn't quite stomach, and so that kicked it. So they were threatening to take this thing away 2 days after it had gone up, not being installed. Anyway, we managed to kind of negotiate our way through that in the end. I mean, I won't go into all the ins and outs, but you know, it's one of those things I've made which kind of, you know, it does a job. Once the idea is rolling, then really it's just technical and nuance and finding the right colour. I mean, finding the right colour. I mean, I've always loved maps and globes, really, frankly, and so it was fun to pick the colours and all that, and like have my own, you know, globe in that sense, and yeah, I like the fact that it's rather sort of triangular in plan site for this thing, and so it does feel kind of right, and I quite like the idea that it's just sort of rolled there as well. It's not on a plinth or anything. It just hoved into view one day and kind of like, and then obviously quite a few years later, I started going back and, well, actually shortly after it was installed, I did shoot some video of my phone flipping it back up the other way, just to, you know. So I suppose quite often I have a few half ideas kind of at the back of my mind or whatever. So I think the upside down thing was there for me, and just talking about gravity, just to turn an image upside down, does show us quite how poised we are, in all our movements to deal with this, the possibility of a fall, really, but just how skilled we can get around this planet, and then this was shot over a year ago now. I'd been at the start of a Palestine march that started at just above Russell Square, and then I kind of peeled away as it was coming down Kingsway. And the title, gravity is the weakest force in the universe, it kind of suggests there are other forces that might perhaps be greater, and that we are, creatures of love and desire and hatred and common cause and all the rest of it, but I like the fact that it's now become just an everyday object or a bit of street furniture, really, and a nice sort of meeting point, meet you at the world.
Is that it? Do you want to take some questions? Or?
No, absolutely, yes. No, that's so, anyway, so if anyone's got any questions,
Mark, did you, I'm sorry, I may have missed it, did you mention in relation to the paintings, as you might do, to the video?
No, I didn't, but thank you for that.
They do kind of connect.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Matthew. In a funny kind of way, when I was thinking about what I was going to show here, and I was, actually in the throes of making these two video works, I did hope and believe that these new paintings would work alongside them, and I think it is because they kind of appear digital. There isn't the hand of the artist or by proxy intent that is leaping out to tell you how to look at them. They are kind of fairly, like a phenomenon. So it's just, so to look at them is almost, to point yourself at this visual summation of all these physical forces, and I suppose I do, that's still, I can't remember off the top of my head, if you go through the whole spectrum, through sound to light waves to, from ultraviolet, infrared, that's just a kind of continuum, and so I like the way that they give it themselves just as they hit the retina, but they kind of summon up or sort of become apparent as related to all those other kind of waveforms.
I could ask another one.
Go on.
No, you sure? No one else is. It's our observation. The Earth, the globe, in this one now, because you've done what you've done with this turning upside down, it's hanging off the Earth.
It is.
In a way.
Yes.
It's not only.
It's clinging on. Yes.
Which is quite weird to give it.
It is, and it's a bit. I was trying to get my head around that the other day. There's that Manzoni piece, isn't there, where he just upends a plinth on the Earth, and it's doing something a bit similar to that. It's a plinth for the Earth. The world is a plinth for the Earth, or vice versa. Which way is it? It's like the whole world is just on this kind of like tiny kind of like
It's quite disorientating, really. Like what's first and what's.
Yes.
Did you say it wasn't fixed to the ground?
It is, although it's got a bit of give to it, which is actually quite alarming. It only takes a couple of kids and they can start rocking it a bit.
Is it actually protected? Is it within a kind of gated building.
No.
So at night time, one could go and leave it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
It's really.
I mean, it got really radically tagged by
Yeah, you think it would?
the video artist 10 Foot recently, but he was quite kind. I think it was a water-based thing that he washed off himself once he got some pictures. Yeah. Yeah.
But generally it's surviving.
Yeah.
Which I think it's quite an interesting thing that it does. Because
I mean, there's certain regions do get
Okay.
attacked and have but no, generally speaking.
you'd hope it would reflect the way people feel about their planet. wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, you would, yeah. The security there, that's the thing.
That does it all.
Like there's human security, yeah.
We have something.
Yeah.
And if, this is a very silly thing to say, but if you took it to Australia, would you turn it around?
Well,
Turn the monitor up, Elliot.
Yeah, we're getting into that kind of thing, aren't we?
Well, it does do that.
Yes, yeah, no, indeed. And then the water runs around the
Yes.
spiral, doesn't it? Yes. Well, I'd have to take it on tour, but I mean, and try it out, actually. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say was, your sand piece.
Yes.
I mean, did you say? I'm afraid I arrived Saturday.
Yeah.
Did you say it's like time stopped?
Yes.
Because it is.
It is. Time stood still.
When you said that.
Yeah. No, I was describing panic attacks that I got.
Yeah. Which made
back
you
in the
feel
day,
like
which
that.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing is it's on its side. It's a figure eight. It's
Infinity
symbol.
symbol. Yeah.
So there's that kind of.
Yeah.
It's not just C stuff, but it's infinite.
Yeah. Dermot, thank you.
Is Margate where you're going to retire?
Well, I don't know. I was describing Clary. I had, almost a sort of religious experience there. I don't know whether to go into. Maybe I should go into this, but so this was just after I'd been asked to think about T.S. Eliot and the Wasteland, which originally came to me when I was young and a fan of a band called Curved Air, who used quite a chunk from it in their 1972 album, was it Air Conditioning? Anyway, there we are, going back a bit. So in the end, I went to stay a few nights there. I ended up staying there 10 days, and it's uniquely positioned, Margate, in that it's the north-east tip of Kent, but because of the way the harbour is shaped, you can sit on those nice steps they built there and watch the sun set over the sea, looking west, and you think, wow, but that's fact, and so people, after the first couple of nights, people from all over the place would gather there at night. I mean, it was particularly good weather at the time as well, and and on this night, as it was building towards the sunset, I'd been noticing that really literally thousands of gulls had started gathering in the town, and it was a particularly full coterie of people watching, including this drug dealer who was threatening the man at the other end of his phone through a fair bit early on of this, it was quite but anyway, it was really beautiful. The sun was about to sort of kiss the horizon, and then this man suddenly appeared and started walking backwards into the sea, and he had a bucket or something similar attached around his neck and shoulders, and all these gulls started coming down to feed on it, and then he just fell backwards into the water, and I can't recall him ever coming up again. and these gulls, rather than stick around because they are scavengers and think, well, that's where it is, they cleared their way very quickly, and then, you know, having concentrated on, I looked around, and like at every point in the sky, near and far, were these gulls that were riding this warm wind that was coming directly from the sun. Yeah, and it was quite staggering actually. Yeah.
Why do you call it religious?
Because it seemed just too supernaturally perfect to have been an accident, really. Yeah.
Right.
And it just seemed to connect me to the world of the universe. You know, I mean, it really was like, yeah. I mean, it was kind
I
of.
thought it was a wonderful experience.
It was wonder and kind of, you know, humbling as well. You know, and then you know, as a sort of last bonus, once you know, the sun had become sort of half an orange with the horizon, you could see all the rows of wind turbines, but you could see them disappearing over the curve away from you, which is like something you never really see, is it? Looking at the horizon. So that as well was kind of like, whoa, this is really testing out my ability to cope with all this wonder. Yeah. I need to lie down, you know. Kind of,
Make it globe work.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can I just return to when you were talking about, I mean, it wouldn't be relevant to do it the other way up in Australia, because it isn't about how we experience the round Earth. It's about what we see in maps and globes.
Yeah,
so it would be exactly the same in Australia. And look, they even have hot dinner in the middle of summer, don't they?
Well, so I believe.
They have Christmas pudding and snowmen and everything, which is completely bizarre because they still think they must be in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
It's a good one.
You went to Chelsea. What was your experience at Chelsea?
Oh, well, this is a very long time ago. It was,
You got a first?
78.
You got a first?
I didn't. No.
Oh, for your
Yeah, I got
writing.
a 2-2 for my work.
Did
You're
you? So
right.
did I.
Yeah.
I went in 63.
No, I got a first for my
Yeah, for your
writing, but yeah. So I ended up with 2-1, but anyway, well, I met Matthew, which is a highlight. You know,
I got a 2-2 as well.
Yeah.
I'm happy now.
So am I. I was humiliated by getting a 2-2.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, it didn't really bother me at the time. And it was so, I mean, it wasn't a climactic event, was it? They just pinned the result up on the notice board.
Most of my time is standing like this, Mark.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Table
football, yeah, we became very good at that.
I wasn't getting nostalgic, sorry.
No, okay. It was a bit laissez-faire, you could say. I mean, I you know, once I started teaching at Goldsmiths, I remember the first few days teaching there, I was thinking, blimey, I'm trying 20 times more than anyone did at Chelsea, you know. And it was a lot of sort of late middle-aged, slightly posh men who needed a drink by lunchtime, shall we say.
and took the favourites to the pub.
Yes, did they?
Not me.
Not me. No. I never once. No. Yeah.
Or cravats.
It was cravats. Yes, it was. Yeah. Yeah. But there we are.
Because Roger Ackling, because there was the third floor painters, fourth floor paintings, which is a bit more conceptual.
Yeah, you see, I mean, when I was there, really, paints of the abstraction ruled the roost, and if you were interested in anything figurative, then, Matthew and I and a bunch of us were put in a sort of
Cupboard.
awkward squad studio, weren't we? Yeah, cupboard, yeah. Yes,
We did have people like Anne Rees-Mogg, who was a brilliant filmmaker, so you would have known about that.
Yes.
And people like Ivor Cutler came.
Ivor Cutler, so the complementary studies
And Alexis
programme.
Sale.
Yeah.
Complementary studies programme and the art history was very good. So I shouldn't decry all of it, but I could have done it with a bit more teaching or a bit more of an explanation of what the ethos of teaching was about. And then we went a whole year without a head of fine art, didn't we? And that seemed to be a bit inept at the time. I don't know. Yeah, but
My daughter's going there in September, so I was just curious.
Yeah, well, this
This
was God, yeah.
It's changed, it's a different place.
No good
47,
You sure about that?
47 years ago.
So that quickly.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Will you go back to teaching again?
No, I mean I do the odd talk, and well I did some teaching or worked on a project with some sort of lower sixth students at Appleton Burley School a few years ago, and so I'm up for sort of things like that, but yeah, no, I've done my time. Yeah.
You served your penance.
Yeah.
No more questions? Right, well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.